Hey guys, I think I've figured out how to work my computer, so I'm not gonna have a super long intro this time. But today I'm gonna be touching on a little bit about the Centrale Montemartini, which is a museum. As you can tell from these pictures, it has something about it that's different than your typical museum, especially in a big city like Rome. Um, so let's get into it. Okay, so the original museum, or the original building, actually was a power plant. Um, it was dedicated to Giovanni Montemartini, who was a pretty interesting guy, as I found out through my research. He was a politician, among a lot of other things. He was a humanitarian, an author, educator, professor, all kinds of things. And he was a really big player in the political scene of Rome around the early 20th century. And he was thinking to himself how it was weird that a lot of things like water and electricity weren't as easily accessible to the public, and it was owned by a monopoly. And he thought that was wrong, so he pushed a lot for the municipalization of electricity specifically. He was only really successful with electricity, but he pushed for it with water and a bunch of other different resources. So his work in the city of Rome led to there being a new thermoelectric power plant being built in Rome. So that is how the building originally started. And around 1997, it had been abandoned for a while. It was turned into a temporary exhibit, but it was so popular, and you might see why in a little bit as to why so many people loved it. But it was made permanent in 2001, and it's been a super popular museum ever since then. So you might be thinking, what the heck is going on? There's a lot of different things going on inside of the museum. So, like I just mentioned, it was originally a thermoelectric power plant. And then in the 20th century, I think it had been abandoned. And then some people at the Capitolini Superintendents for Cultural Heritage, which helps with a lot of different museums around this area, especially in Italy, decided to convert the space into an art exhibit where they showed off a lot of classical sculptures that had been excavated from Rome around the 18th and 19th century from the classical era and exhibit them here. And the original idea was to showcase kind of the idea of gods versus machines. But there's a couple different interpretations because you can think of that like in an artistic way, but it also does a really good job of showing how Rome came from this, like you see the classical era, like the sculptures, the marble, the mosaics, everything. And then right behind it is something that shows, it's typical of the Industrial Revolution and just kind of how Italy and even the whole world has changed, but specifically Rome, because you really see that contrast between now and modern age and like 2,000, 3,000 years ago. So there's a really interesting layout here. It's divided into four different rooms. There's the atrium, the hall of columns, the hall of machines, and the boiler room. And the top picture up here is from the boiler room, the one with the green all around it. And it also is divided up into different themes according to what the specific sculpture is kind of about. So there's different sections on animals, famous women, goddesses, things like that. A lot of different queens, battles and warriors. Dionysus, I feel like I always say his name wrong, and his followers, which that's him on the very far right. And then also the arts such as poetry, music, theater, and muses, things like that. Um, but it's all very interesting, and I think it has a really nice contrast with the background of the power plant because it's something you would typically think of being showcased together. Um, but there's two really famous pieces here. This is the pediment of Apollo's Sonum, which was from a temple, and they're kind of reconstructing it. But a pediment is, you can kind of see the shape right here. It's when you're looking at a temple, the triangle right in front. I feel like you probably know what I'm talking about. Just it's that triangle shape right at the front of a temple that you see in a lot of different Roman and Greek structures. And it's not complete at all, but these are just kind of bits and pieces they've been putting together. And then there's also the acrotholith of the goddess Fortune. And I don't know if you can quite tell from the picture on the right, but it is literally ginormous. And an acrotholith, I wasn't sure what that meant at first, but it's basically just a sculpture that where part of it is made from marble, like the face and the different appendages and limbs, and then the rest of it is usually made out of wood or a cheaper or less special stone such as limestone or something like that. But it is massive. Like it's ginormous. So hope you get to see it. and it's just something that is very famous around Rome, and they have it here. It's a very popular piece for people to look at. But that's really most of the info I have going into. I'm trying to keep it under 5 minutes. But it's just a very interesting museum, and I think it has a really cool history because the man Giovanni Montemartini just seems like a really awesome guy, a humanitarian, and now it's turned into this beautiful art museum with all different kind of sculptures and mosaics that represent the history of Italy and what it's become now. So I'm excited for us to go see it. And I don't know how to stop this. Okay.